In this video, I'm going to cover the benefits of using scripts instead of using direct console entry and show you how to save and load scripts in RStudio. I'll finish by showing you how to organize your scripts to improve your workflow and project management. Scripts are plain text files containing a written series of instructions. They will often contain multiple lines of code in a single file, so the script in its entirety will contain all of the lines that are required for your whole analysis. This is in contrast to using the console prompt, as we did in the previous video where we were covering some of the fundamentals of data entry in R. In that video, we were using the command prompt. We were entering our analysis in one line at a time, hitting return after every line that we enter, and R would execute the code line by line. In contrast, scripts are executed in their entirety once you've written the whole list of commands for the analysis. So in contrast to the prompt, the analysis is not interactive. You can write multiple lines of code within a script without executing any of it until you're ready to do so to go through your analysis. Using scripts provides a variety of advantages beyond just entering your analysis line by line into the command prompt. Using a script provides a persistent record of your analysis session. If you enter your code just line by line into the command prompt, when you finish your session and return to it, no record is left of the analysis steps that you've taken. However, within a script, all of your analysis is saved, so you can come back to it hours, days, weeks, or even months later, and you will still have a record of the exact steps that you've taken in your analysis. A nice side effect of this is that it allows you and others to reproduce your analysis. Just entering your code line by line leaves no trace, and because it leaves no trace, other people can't reproduce your analysis, and that also includes you when you come back to your work days later. The scripts are reusable, so once they're written, you can execute the entire analysis whenever needed. This is often useful if you suddenly add more data to your data file. Instead of having to go through all of writing the code line by line and analyzing the data again, you can just rerun the script you've already written on the new data set. This aids your productivity considerably. Another great feature of scripts is that you can add comments. This provides documentation of what your code is doing. So these comments are notes to yourself and also to other researchers, telling them what each line of code is doing, so that when you come back to your code in maybe many months later, you're reminded of what the script was actually doing. So coming over to RStudio, I'm going to show you how to start a new script. When you launch RStudio, it should look as it did before in the previous video when we were going through the fundamentals, where you just have the console prompt here. So at the moment, we don't have access to a script. To open a script, you go to this symbol, which is just a blank white page with a green symbol in the top left corner, which is for new file. Just click on this and click RScript. Alternatively, you can go to File, New, and then select RScript. When you do this, a new window appears, and this is your script. This window is resizable, so you can just click on this and you can change the size of your window if you so wish, but this kind of looks okay. Before we start with the script, if we just return to the prompt and just go through a few things that we went through last time. So as before, I mentioned that you can use R like a calculator, so I can put in here 2 plus 2. So you put in 2 plus 2 into the command line, and then you hit return, and R will execute that analysis for you. We can do the same thing in the script file. So if we put 2 plus 2 in here, and then hit return, we notice that nothing happens. And this is one of the differences of scripts. It's in the way that it's executed. R won't do anything with your script until you tell it that you would like a certain line or the whole script to be executed. To execute a line of code, we can highlight it and select this Run button. So you'll see that this has now executed that line of code. Or we can just put our cursor at the end of a particular line of code, or actually anywhere within that line. And on a Mac, you hit Command and Return, or on a Windows machine, that would be Control and Enter. If you do that, it then executes just that line of code. So what we can do is we can enter multiple lines of code. So I can do 3 times 4. I can do 12 divided by 3.4. I can do 78 multiplied by 3, etc., etc. And as before, every time I'm hitting enter, it's not executing that code. But I can go back and run each line separately by doing command and return, or control and enter if you're on a Windows. And you'll see that every time I do so, R is executing that particular line of code and moving on to the next line. This obviously in the real world would contain a series of commands that are meaningful to the analysis that you're conducting. One of the values of scripts is that we can save this for future reference and we can load it back in at a future date. And to do this, just like a Word document or any other type of document, you can go to the save icon or go to File, Save As in RStudio. So I can click Save, and then I can save this to whichever folder I wish and give it a meaningful name. So I'll call this YouTube script. And then this is now saved. And you'll see that the script is now called the name that I've just given it. What this means is that in future, I can open RStudio up from scratch, and then I can go to the open icon, which is just this open folder. And then I can orient to where I keep my files, desktop, YouTube. And then I can orient down to my script, and I can open up that script from scratch. I've closed RStudio down and opened it up again. So this is if I'm coming back to my script the next day to continue work on it. So at the moment I have no access to the analysis that I conducted, but I go to the open symbol and then I orient to the folder where I've been keeping my script, select the YouTube script, and I can open it. And you'll see that it then brings back the record of what I was working on. So let's actually do something slightly more meaningful. For this, what we're going to do is we're just going to enter some of the data that we were using in the fundamentals video the last time, which was the data containing the shoe size of some participants, the name of some participants, and whether they've retired or not. And you'll recall that we were using vectors to store some of this information. So first I'll just show you how to use scripts to collect vectors, and then I'll also show you again how to create a data frame from scratch using scripts. So we can create a vector called shoe sizes. Just to recall, let's say we've got data from 4 subjects and for whatever reason you've collected their shoe sizes. So we're creating a variable called shoe sizes, and remember the snake case when you've got variable names that have more than one word. Then we have the assignment character. This means that we're creating a variable called shoe sizes and we're going to put something into that variable. What we're going to put into that variable is going to be a vector. So what we want to do is use the C command to combine some information together. So we type C and then open some brackets, and then whatever goes in the brackets is what's being stored in the vector. And it's shoe sizes of 11, 10, 6, and 9. So unlike the command line, when we hit return, nothing happens in R because it's a script. So it's not being executed until we tell R to execute a particular portion. Now let's store some names. So we're going to create a new variable called names, use the assignment character, and then we're going to pass to it another vector, but this time of some character data elements. And these are going to be the names of my participants. So it'll be Jim, Ed, Carol, and Steve. As before, we hit return and nothing happens. So if we want R to execute this code line by line, recall that we can either select a particular row by highlighting it, or we can just include our cursor anywhere within the particular line that we want to execute. And then we can either hit the run button, or we can use command return on a Mac or control enter on a Windows machine. And that would run this particular line of code. So you'll see R has now run that particular line. You get an echo into the console prompt. And you also see in the environment that a new variable has been created called shoe sizes, and it shows you what's in there. The other nice aspect of script is that you could select everything in your script and run everything at once. So you can select by just click dragging and highlighting the lines that you want to run all together and then hit run. And you'll see now it's run everything at once. Okay, so let's delete this data. Now let's create a data frame. And we went through data frames in the fundamentals video. Just to remind you, a data frame is more akin to an Excel spreadsheet, for example. It will have columns and rows representing particular pieces of data for multiple variables. So we want to create a new data frame. Let's give it a more meaningful name. I'll call it, let's call it participant data. Participant data. So again, I'm using snake case, and I'm creating a variable by using the assignment character. And to create a data frame, we use the data.frame syntax. This tells R we want to create a data frame. Then we open our parentheses, and what goes in the parentheses is what's going to be going into the data frame. So what we can do is we can just hit return. Remember in the last video, this just gives us a bit of space. It makes the code a little bit easier to read and just a little bit nicer to look at. So here we're going to create a data frame, and it's going to have a variety of columns. The first column is going to be called names because we want to enter the names of our participants. So we say that we want the column to be called names, and then in that column we use the equal symbol, not the assignment character, because we're not creating a new variable. We're just creating a column in our data frame. Well, we want the names of our participants. So recall that they are Jim, Ed, Carol, and Steve. Once we finish with the information we want to go in a column, we go to the end of the parentheses, and then we just hit comma to say we finished with this one. We're now going to move to the next one. And in the next column, we're going to add shoe sizes. And these are the shoe sizes that we've been using so far. 11, 10, 6, and 9. Finish with that column, so a comma. And now we want to have a logical set of data that just codes whether our participants have retired or not. So these are going to be true or false values. So for the first two participants, they have not retired, so this would be false, false, but the final two participants have retired. That's all that we want to go into our data frame, so we don't enter a final comma at the end here. This is our complete data frame. And to run this particular code in our script, when you've got multiple lines for a particular piece of code, you can put your cursor absolutely anywhere, but whilst you're getting used to this, it's recommended just highlight everything just by clicking and dragging to ensure that the whole of the piece of the code is highlighted that you want to run, and then just hit the run button. And you'll see this has created a new data frame called participant data. We can have a look at this just by calling participant data and then running that particular line of code. So you'll see here I'm just putting my cursor on that particular line and hitting Command and Enter or Control and Enter. And down in the bottom left, we can see our data frame. Another really nice part of writing script is that you can write comments to yourself. To write a comment, you use the hash symbol, and then you can enter any text that you wish. And you'll see using my theme, it's slightly grayed out. R will ignore this when it comes to execute the code. So anything that has got a hash on the same line is considered a comment. So comments are useful because these provide breadcrumbs to your future self. It's telling you and other readers of your code what a particular piece of code is doing, so that when you come back to it many weeks later, you can remind yourself what you were thinking when you were writing the analysis. So when you're using comments, it's important to be as clear as possible as to what the code is doing. I would err on the side of writing too much rather than too little with your comments, so that when you come back to it later, you leave no doubt as to what the analysis was actually doing. So for example, I can write an instructive comment to myself telling me what this data frame is. So you see here I have two lines of code, and if I select this and try and run it, you'll notice that R doesn't do anything. All it's doing is it's just echoing the comment, but it doesn't actually conduct any processing at all. Another really important and useful feature of scripts is that we can organize our script in such a way so that we separate different components of our analysis in a single file. Again, this just makes everything much easier. It makes the workflow of your project much easier if you're separating your script into important different components. To do this, what we can do is we can press Command, Shift and R. This will be Control, Shift and R in your Windows machines if you're using Windows, but it's Command, Shift and R if you're using a Mac. And we can provide section labels. So let's say our first section of the script we want to be where we import our data. So we give our section a meaningful name, import data, and you'll see what it does is it creates a new, it's sort of a comment, well it is a comment, but it's got these dashes that just visually provides a bit of separation between the section header of your script and also the comments and the actual code itself within each section. You'll recall from earlier in this series where we talked about the standard workflow of a data analysis project, and it tends to be split into importing your data, tidying your data, then transforming your data. So this might be where you're creating new variables or summarizing your data, for example, the average shoe size of your participants, for example. Then you'd be visualizing your data, creating some type of chart or plot of your data to get an overview of the trends and the characteristics of your data before finally modeling your data or conducting the statistical analysis. We can use these section headers to split your code or your script into those important different sections of the data analysis workflow. So, for example, we've already created one section called import data. So we could create a second section label, again by pressing Command, Shift and R, or Control, Shift and R in Windows. And we could say this is the section where we're going to tidy our data. And you'll see this creates a new section. And in here, this is where we can tidy our data. Obviously, we don't have any code for the tidying yet because we haven't covered that in this series. We can then have a new section called transform data. Another section where we visualize our data. And then another section where we model our data. Whoops, beg your pardon. Command Shift and R, model data. So you can see that we're starting to separate our script into different sections. And these sections represent key elements of our data analysis workflow. It might look like overkill at the moment because we haven't got much code at all. In fact, we've only got some code in the import data section. But often each of these steps will quite frequently be many lines long. So your script is going to become quite long, especially for more involved data analysis projects that you're going to be doing later in this series. So by keeping your script in an organized manner is going to really help you in future when you come back to your script and carry on with your analysis. So that was just a quick video introducing you to scripts in R. For the remainder of this series, we're going to use scripts almost exclusively. We may use the command line from time to time, but much of the analysis we're going to be doing are going to be using these scripts. So have a go at creating your own scripts, saving your scripts and reloading those scripts back into RStudio, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.